Trust is the foundation of every meaningful relationship. Without it, connections crumble. But here's the unsettling truth. Many of us unknowingly engage in behaviors that erode trust, slowly and silently. Have you ever wondered if something you're doing, without even realizing it, might be pushing people away? As the Stoic philosopher Epictetus reminds us, first, learn the meaning of what you say, and then speak. In other words, our actions and words carry weight, whether we notice it or not. And when trust is involved, even the smallest misstep can ripple through a relationship like a stone dropped into still water. Now think about this. Have you ever felt the sting of betrayal? Or maybe the discomfort of wondering why someone no longer feels as close as they once did? It's a tough pill to swallow, realizing that trust, once lost, is incredibly hard to rebuild. But here's the good news. By identifying these hidden behaviors, we can stop the damage before it's too late. In this video, we'll uncover 9 destructive habits that may be silently eroding trust in your relationships, behaviors you might not even be aware of. From subtle patterns like withholding emotions to actions as unintentional as breaking small promises, these habits might seem harmless on the surface. But their impact? It can be devastating. Pause for a moment. Imagine the people you care about most. Your partner, your best friend, your family. What if you could strengthen those bonds instead of unknowingly weakening them? What if, with a few small changes, you could build trust so solid that it becomes unshakable? This isn't about blaming yourself or others. It's about understanding. The Stoics believed in self-awareness as the first step toward mastery. As Marcus Aurelius once said, "Look within. The foundation of all goodness lies within you." And today, that's exactly what we're going to do. We'll explore why these behaviors happen, how they can sneak into our daily lives, and most importantly, how to stop them. Trust is too precious to leave to chance. So stick around, because every minute you invest here will help you strengthen the most important relationships in your life. Behavior. Number 1, withholding emotions. Have you ever felt something deeply but held back from saying it? Maybe you thought, what's the point? They won't get it anyway. It might seem harmless in the moment, even protective. But here's the truth. When we withhold our emotions, especially from the people we care about, we don't just avoid conflict. We create distance. Picture this. Sarah has been married to James for 3 years. Lately, James has been coming home late from work, exhausted and distracted. Sarah starts to feel invisible, unimportant. But instead of sharing her feelings, she pushes them aside, thinking, he's stressed enough already, why should I make it worse? So, she says nothing. But inside, those emotions start to build, a quiet resentment she can't ignore. At first, James doesn't notice, but over time, he senses her withdrawal. Her conversations are shorter, her tone colder. He starts to feel like he's done something wrong, but he has no idea what. And just like that, their relationship begins to drift. Not because of what's been said, but because of what hasn't. It's a common trap, isn't it? We hold back because we don't want to hurt someone or spark a fight. But Stoicism reminds us that clarity and openness are key to any strong relationship. Marcus Aurelius said it perfectly. Be clear in your own mind what you want and express it plainly. When we withhold emotions, we force others to guess what's going on inside us. And guessing, it's a dangerous game. Assumptions creep in, misunderstandings grow, and before you know it, you're looking at someone you love and wondering how you ended up so far apart. But why do we do it? Often, it's fear. Fear of being judged, fear of conflict, or fear of being vulnerable. Sometimes we convince ourselves that staying silent is the strong thing to do. But let's be honest, how often does bottling things up actually make them better? The truth is, when we keep our feelings to ourselves, we rob others of the chance to understand us. We deny them the opportunity to respond, to grow, to connect with us on a deeper level. Vulnerability isn't a weakness, it's a bridge. Think about it. Would you rather someone close to you guess how you're feeling, or would you prefer they know? Let me share this. When Sarah finally opened up to James, she realized he wasn't ignoring her on purpose. He'd been so consumed by work that he didn't see how his late nights were affecting her. Once he understood, he made changes, not because he was forced to, but because he wanted to. And just like that, they started to rebuild the connection they'd almost lost. The lesson here is simple but powerful. Withholding emotions might feel like a safe choice, but in reality, it creates walls instead of bridges. The Stoics understood this. They knew that honesty, tempered with kindness, fosters trust. So let me ask you, is there someone in your life who deserves to know how you truly feel? Maybe you've been holding back, waiting for the right moment. But here's the thing, the perfect moment rarely comes. The best time to speak your truth is now. Remember, trust isn't just about what we say, it's also about what we don't. And withholding emotions, that's a silent thief. It steals connection, understanding, and closeness. But the good news is, you have the power to stop it. Starting today, you can choose clarity, you can choose openness. It's not always easy, I know, but as the Stoics would remind us, the things that matter most rarely are, and in the end, the effort is always worth it. Behavior number 2, excessive criticism. Have you ever been on the receiving end of constant criticism? Maybe it was from a friend, a parent, or even a partner. They might have thought they were helping, but instead, it felt like every little thing you did wasn't good enough. It's exhausting, isn't it? It makes you question yourself, your choices, your abilities, even your worth. Now let's flip the perspective for a moment. Think about a time when you've been the one giving criticism. Did it come from a place of care or maybe frustration? And here's the real question. Did it actually help the other person, or did it push them further away? Take Emily and her teenage son, Jake. Emily loved Jake deeply, but her way of showing it often came across as harsh. If Jake got a B on a test, she'd ask why it wasn't an A. If he cleaned his room, she'd point out the spot he missed under the bed. Her intentions were good. She wanted Jake to do his best, but Jake didn't feel supported. He felt attacked, like he couldn't win no matter how hard he tried. Over time, Jake stopped sharing things with his mom. He didn't want to hear what he was doing wrong, and Emily, confused and hurt, started feeling like her son was drifting away. This is the danger of excessive criticism. It creates a wall where there should be a bridge. Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers, reminds us to be tolerant with others and strict with yourself. In other words, hold yourself to high standards, but approach others with understanding and kindness. When we're overly critical, even with good intentions, we damage trust. We send the message, intentionally or not, that the person isn't enough as they are. And that's a hard thing to hear, especially from someone you care about. So how do we stop? How do we turn criticism into something constructive rather than destructive? First, pause before you speak. Ask yourself, is what I'm about to say helpful, or am I just venting frustration? Sometimes we criticize out of our own stress or impatience, not because it's actually necessary. Second, focus on the positive. Instead of zeroing in on what went wrong, highlight what went right. For example, instead of saying you missed a spot under the bed, try your room looks so much better, thanks for tidying up. It's amazing how far a little encouragement can go. And third, if you must give feedback, do it with care. Frame it as a suggestion, not a judgment. For example, instead of saying, "You're always late," you could say, "I've noticed time has been a challenge lately. How can I help?" When Emily started making these changes, something incredible happened. She caught herself before criticizing and replaced it with encouragement. Instead of asking Jake why he didn't get an A, she celebrated the effort he put into getting a B. Instead of pointing out the spot he missed, she thanked him for cleaning, and slowly, Jake started opening up again. He felt safe, supported, and trusted. The Stoics teach us that trust is built through our actions, not just our words. If we want others to trust us, we need to show them that we see their value, not just their flaws. So, let me ask you, is there someone in your life who could use more encouragement and less critique? Maybe it's a friend, a family member, or even yourself, because here's the thing, none of us are perfect. We're all just doing our best. And when we approach others with kindness instead of criticism, we create space for growth, connection, and trust. It's not about ignoring mistakes. It's about recognizing that everyone, including you, is a work in progress. As Epictetus said, it is impossible to learn that which you think you already know. Excessive criticism closes the door to learning and connection, but understanding, patience, and constructive feedback, that's how we build something stronger. So the next time you feel the urge to criticize, pause, reflect, and choose your words carefully, because the way we speak to others shapes the relationships we have, and those relationships are worth protecting. Behavior number 3, being overly defensive. Have you ever been in an argument where you're just trying to get your point across, but the other person immediately starts defending themselves instead of listening? It feels like talking to a brick wall, doesn't it? You try to express your feelings or frustrations, but instead of a conversation, you get a wall of excuses or blame deflection. It's frustrating, and more importantly, it destroys trust. Let's take a look at Sarah and Mark, a couple who have been together for years. Recently, Sarah felt that Mark had been distant, not paying attention to her like he used to. When she finally spoke up about it, asking if everything was okay, Mark immediately got defensive. "You think I don't care? I work all day and you know how stressful things are," he said, raising his voice. Sarah's frustration deepened. She wasn't attacking Mark, she was just sharing her feelings. But instead of acknowledging her emotions, Mark immediately shifted the conversation into defense mode, making it about his stress and his work. The thing is, defensiveness doesn't resolve anything. It only pushes people away. It prevents us from hearing the other person's perspective and truly understanding their feelings. When we refuse to accept responsibility or acknowledge our own shortcomings, we create distance in the relationship. This is a classic example of how defensiveness destroys trust. Mark could have acknowledged Sarah's feelings, even if he didn't fully agree with her. But by immediately deflecting blame, he made Sarah feel unheard and unsupported. And trust. It takes a hit every time that happens. The Stoics had a simple yet powerful way of looking at these situations. Marcus Aurelius taught us, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. In other words, don't deflect blame or spend time justifying yourself. Instead, focus on what you can control, your own actions and reactions. In relationships, when we get defensive, it's often because we feel vulnerable. We don't want to admit fault, and we fear being judged. But here's the truth. Defensiveness is a reaction, not a solution. And the more we defend ourselves, the more we close ourselves off from growth and understanding. So how can we overcome defensiveness and rebuild trust? First, take a breath and pause before reacting. In those moments when the instinct to defend yourself kicks in, just stop for a second. Reflect on what the other person is saying. Is it a personal attack, or are they simply trying to communicate how they feel? If we can separate ourselves from the initial emotional reaction, we open the door to a more productive and respectful conversation. Next, own up to your part in the situation. Even if you feel like you're being unfairly blamed, try to recognize your own mistakes. This doesn't mean accepting blame for everything or losing your voice, but it does mean being willing to look at the situation from a place of honesty and humility. Yes, I see how that could have hurt you, and I'm sorry for not being more mindful. This simple act of acknowledging the other person's feelings creates an opening for healing. Finally, don't be afraid to be vulnerable. Instead of closing up and throwing up walls, show the person that you are willing to listen and learn. Vulnerability doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. The Stoics believed that true strength comes from accepting our own imperfections and embracing responsibility for our actions. Now let's think about this for a moment. How often do we respond defensively just to avoid the discomfort of facing our own flaws? It's easy to get caught up in that cycle, but when we choose to stop defending and start listening, when we choose to own up to our mistakes, something incredible happens. We invite deeper trust, connection, and understanding. As Epictetus said, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. So the next time you feel yourself getting defensive, try to listen first. Pause, reflect, own your mistakes, and instead of a defensive reaction, offer a response that fosters understanding and connection, because trust isn't built through excuses, it's built through vulnerability, accountability, and listening. Behavior number 4, lack of empathy. Have you ever shared something deeply personal with someone, hoping they'd understand how you felt, only to have them completely miss the point? It's as if they were listening, but not really hearing you. The words may be there, but the emotional connection is gone. That's the painful impact of a lack of empathy. Let me tell you about Emma and John. They had been together for 3 years, but recently Emma had been feeling overwhelmed. She had lost a close family member, and the grief was taking a toll. One evening, she tried to open up to John. She said, "I've been feeling so drained, and I don't know how to keep going sometimes." John, who'd been busy with work, looked at her with a blank stare and said, "Well, we all have our problems. I've been working overtime just to keep things afloat. You'll get over it." Emma's heart sank. Instead of feeling supported, she felt dismissed. John's response wasn't cruel, but it was detached. It lacked the emotional understanding she needed from him. And just like that, trust was eroded. You see, when someone you care about is going through something difficult, the last thing they need is a response that invalidates their feelings. When empathy is absent, it creates distance. Instead of feeling heard and understood, you feel invisible. This doesn't just hurt, it undermines the trust that keeps relationships strong. Empathy is more than just listening. It's about trying to understand the emotions behind the words. It's about putting yourself in the other person's shoes and recognizing that their feelings are valid, even if you don't fully understand them. Without that, trust begins to crack. The Stoics had a profound understanding of empathy. Marcus Aurelius believed that we should always remind ourselves, what is not good for the beehive cannot be good for the bees. In other words, what harms one person can ultimately harm everyone. It's the Stoic idea that we are all interconnected, and by understanding and supporting one another, we strengthen the bond that holds us together. But how can we practice empathy in our everyday lives, especially when we're stressed or preoccupied with our own challenges? First, make the effort to truly listen. This may sound simple, but in today's fast-paced world, we're often distracted. We listen to respond rather than listening to understand. The next time someone opens up to you, really focus on their words. Pay attention to the tone of their voice, their body language, and the emotion behind what they're saying. Don't just wait for your turn to speak. Sit with their feelings for a moment. Take Sarah, for example. She's struggling with a tough situation at work, but instead of trying to fix it for her, her friend James simply listens. He asks thoughtful questions and makes sure she feels heard. He doesn't offer solutions immediately, but shows through his presence that he understands. That's empathy in action. Next, validate the other person's feelings. Even if you don't agree with how they're feeling, acknowledge that their emotions are real and important. If Emma's grief felt overwhelming, John could have said, "I can't imagine what you're going through, but I'm here for you." This simple validation makes the other person feel supported, and it can be the difference between building trust and pushing someone away. Another key is recognizing your own emotional state. Sometimes we don't show empathy because we're too caught up in our own problems. If you're tired, stressed, or upset, it can be harder to be there for others. The Stoics understood that we must be in control of our emotions to be fully present for others. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." By taking a moment to manage our own emotions, we can better respond to the needs of others. Finally, practice patience. Sometimes, empathy means giving the other person time to express themselves fully. Don't rush in with advice or explanations. Let them process their emotions first. After all, we all need time to heal, to think, and to feel before we're ready to move forward. Think about the last time someone was really there for you, truly listening and offering support. You probably felt heard, valued, and cared for. That's the power of empathy. And when you offer it to others, you deepen your connection and build trust. If you want to foster stronger relationships, practice empathy, not just listening with your ears, but feeling with your heart. Take the time to understand, validate, and support. Trust isn't built through words alone, it's built through understanding. And when you practice empathy, you show that you care, that you're present, and that you value the other person's emotional world. Behavior number 5, breaking promises. We've all been there, right? Someone makes a promise, and in the back of our minds we trust them because promises are sacred. But then, something happens. The promise is broken. Maybe in a small way, maybe something bigger, and suddenly the trust we had is chipped away, piece by piece. It's painful, isn't it? Think about it. You're in a relationship, and your partner promises to make time for you, something simple, like spending the evening together. You're excited, you've set everything up for a nice night. But then, at the last minute, they cancel. Work came up, or they just forgot. It's a small thing, but you can't help but feel that pang of disappointment. And the more this happens, the more you start doubting their word. It's not just the broken promises that hurt, it's the doubt they bring, the question that lingers in your mind. Can I trust them again? Every time a promise is broken, trust becomes a little weaker, like an old bridge that's no longer strong enough to carry the weight. But here's the thing, the Stoics understood the weight of promises long before we ever talked about keeping your word. Marcus Aurelius said it simply, "A promise is a debt." That's right, a debt. When you make a promise, you're not just offering words, you're taking on a responsibility. It's like borrowing someone's trust, and with that trust comes an obligation to follow through. Breaking that promise? It's like defaulting on a loan, and it's a loan that can cost you more than you realize. Now, I know life happens, things come up, you might forget, or circumstances might change, but the real issue isn't the occasional slip-up, it's the pattern. When someone continuously breaks promises, it doesn't just hurt in the moment, it creates a foundation of doubt. The next time they promise something, you're not just excited, you're skeptical. That trust, that connection, it starts to fray. Let me give you a scenario. Liam and Rachel were dating for a few months, and Liam had promised Rachel he would meet her family at a gathering. It was important to her, and she was really looking forward to it. But the day before, Liam texted saying something had come up at work and he couldn't make it. Rachel was disappointed, but she understood. Life happens, right? But then, it happened again the next month, and again the next. Soon enough, Rachel began to feel that Liam didn't care as much as he said. The broken promises piled up, and it wasn't about the events themselves. It was about how it made her feel. Unimportant, taken for granted. The impact of those broken promises was more profound than just a few missed dates. It was about trust, and when trust breaks down, it's hard to rebuild. So how do we stop this cycle? How do we make sure we're people of our word, people who can be trusted? Here's a simple yet powerful Stoic approach. Be mindful of what you promise. The Stoics believed in being clear-eyed about our intentions and our limitations. Instead of overcommitting, learn to say no. If you're not sure you can deliver, don't promise it. If you do promise something, make sure it's something you can truly give. No one is perfect, but consistency is key. By keeping your promises big or small, you show your partner, your friends, or your team that you value their trust. And that's something that goes a long way. Another helpful Stoic practice is accountability. If you do miss a promise, own up to it. Don't try to explain it away or justify it. Acknowledge the mistake and show that you understand its impact. Just like Marcus Aurelius wrote, we must keep our actions in line with our values. And one of those values, keeping our word. So the next time you make a promise, remember, it's more than just words. It's a commitment to another person's trust. And if life gets in the way, be upfront about it. People will respect your honesty, and more importantly, they'll feel safe with you. Trust doesn't come easy, but it's built with every promise you keep and every action you take to show that you value the people around you. When you're true to your word, you create a foundation that's solid, and that's something worth building. Behavior number 6, inconsistency. I think we all know the feeling when someone's behavior is, well, inconsistent. One minute, they're warm and loving, and the next, they're distant or cold. It's confusing, it's unsettling, and it doesn't just affect how you see them, it can mess with how you see yourself too. Imagine this scenario. Sarah and Tom had been dating for a few months. When things were good, they were great. Tom would be affectionate, thoughtful, and incredibly present, always sending texts, planning dates, and showing Sarah how much he cared. But then, without warning, he'd go silent. No messages, no plans, just nothing. It was like flipping a switch, and Sarah was left wondering if she'd done something wrong or if something had changed. The unpredictability wore her down, leaving her anxious and unsure. This inconsistency started to take a toll on Sarah's trust. She felt like she couldn't count on Tom, and every time his behavior shifted, it created more insecurity. And, as you might guess, this kind of confusion isn't healthy in any relationship. Over time, it builds a wall of uncertainty. How can you trust someone when their actions don't match their words? How can you know where you stand when their mood can change from one moment to the next? Now let's tie this back to something Stoic philosophy teaches us. The Stoics valued consistency, not just in our actions, but in our character. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most famous Stoic philosophers, often spoke about the importance of being the same person in every circumstance, maintaining integrity no matter what. When you're reliable and consistent, people know what to expect from you, and that predictability is the bedrock of trust. In relationships, consistency doesn't mean being rigid. It doesn't mean you never change or have off days. It's about showing up with the same core values every time. It's about being reliable, not just in the small things, like showing up when you say you will, but in the way you make others feel. It's about being emotionally stable, kind, and dependable, even when life gets chaotic. Let's go back to Sarah and Tom for a second. If Tom had been more consistent in his behavior, if he had communicated honestly when he needed space, Sarah wouldn't have felt so uncertain. If he had made an effort to be present even on tough days, if he had learned to balance his mood without pushing her away, Sarah would have felt more secure in their relationship. So how do we create more consistency in our own lives? How can we start being more reliable, not just in our actions, but in the way we show up for the people we care about? The first step is awareness. Take a moment to reflect on your own behavior. Are you unpredictable? Do you tend to go hot and cold? How does that affect the people around you, especially those you love and care about? Being honest with yourself is crucial. Next, communication is key. If something is going on, let the other person know. If you're feeling overwhelmed or distant, it's okay to share that. It's not about using unpredictability as an excuse, but about giving the other person context so they don't feel confused or rejected. The Stoics also talk about focusing on what's within our control. And guess what? Our consistency is something we can control. By making the choice to be predictable in our actions and behavior, we're taking charge of how others experience us. It doesn't mean we have to be perfect all the time, but it does mean we show up as our best, most reliable selves. Another Stoic approach is self-regulation, being able to control our emotions and reactions. When life gets tough or we're feeling down, it's easy to slip into a pattern of being distant or unavailable. But the Stoics remind us that we can choose how to respond. Instead of letting our moods dictate our actions, we can pause, reflect, and decide to act with intention. This is a practice that takes time, but it's one that can lead to greater stability in all our relationships. And finally, remember that consistency is built over time. Trust doesn't happen overnight, and it's not just about the big gestures. Small, consistent actions, checking in, showing empathy, being present. These are the things that make a difference. It's not about perfection, it's about showing up consistently in both good times and bad. Think about it. The next time you catch yourself being inconsistent, ask yourself, am I being the person I want to be? Am I creating the kind of trust I want to build? And if the answer is no, use the tools of awareness, communication, and self-regulation to get back on track. In the end, consistency doesn't just help build trust in relationships, it builds trust in ourselves. And when we're consistent, both with others and with ourselves, we create deeper, more meaningful connections that stand the test of time. Behavior number 7, controlling or manipulative behavior. Let's talk about something that can seriously erode trust in any relationship: control and manipulation. At first glance, it might seem like someone who wants to control everything is just being protective or caring. But over time, this behavior isn't just draining, it can be downright damaging. When one partner tries to control or manipulate the other, resentment builds and trust starts to unravel. Imagine this situation. Ava and Mark had been dating for a year, and while their relationship seemed perfect on the surface, things were starting to feel off for Ava. Mark would always suggest what she should wear, what she should do with her free time, and even who she should hang out with. At first, Ava thought it was cute. After all, Mark seemed to know what was best for her, right? But then, as time went on, she realized that his suggestions weren't just harmless. They were more like demands. And whenever Ava did something Mark didn't like, he'd either give her the cold shoulder or use guilt to manipulate her into doing things his way. Ava felt suffocated. She couldn't make a simple decision without Mark's approval. Slowly, resentment started to build. The more Mark controlled her, the less Ava felt like her own person. She felt trapped, not just in the relationship, but in her own life. Eventually, Ava became resentful, and the trust they had once shared began to fade. This is what manipulation and controlling behavior do. They chip away at autonomy and freedom, and without those, a relationship can't thrive. When one person's needs and desires consistently override the others, it breeds insecurity, confusion, and eventually deep-seated resentment. Now let's bring in some Stoic wisdom. Stoics, like Epictetus, often spoke about the importance of respecting others' autonomy. He said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." In other words, we can't control other people. No matter how much we might want to shape their behavior, the only person we can truly control is ourselves. In relationships, that means respecting your partner's freedom and allowing them to make their own choices. The Stoics believed that forcing others to conform to your will not only undermines their freedom, but also your own integrity. When we try to manipulate or control, we're no longer acting from a place of love and respect, but from a place of insecurity, fear, or ego. It's important to note that true connection doesn't come from manipulation. It comes from mutual respect, understanding, and above all, freedom. Freedom to be yourself, freedom to make mistakes, and freedom to grow. When one partner tries to control the other, it forces them into a mold, stifling their growth and making them feel like they're always walking on eggshells. So, how can we foster a relationship built on trust, freedom, and mutual respect? First, recognize the signs of controlling behavior. Are you or your partner trying to dictate what the other does? Are you trying to influence their decisions based on guilt or fear? If so, it's time to pause and reflect on the bigger picture. Ask yourself, are we growing together or are we growing apart? Next, practice letting go of the need to control. This is a big one. The Stoics teach us that true freedom comes from accepting that we cannot control everything, and that includes the people we love. Instead of trying to dictate how someone should live their life, practice embracing their choices, even if they don't align with your preferences. The key here is respect. Respect your partner's choices and their right to make mistakes. Instead of controlling them, be there to support them. Sometimes that means letting them make decisions that you might not agree with, but understanding that these decisions are theirs to make. And let's not forget communication. Open and honest dialogue is a huge part of any healthy relationship. If something is bothering you, whether it's the feeling of being controlled or seeing your partner overstep boundaries, speak up. Share your thoughts calmly without resorting to manipulation or guilt. Use I statements instead of you statements. For example, instead of saying, "You always try to control me," say, "I feel like my decisions aren't being respected when I'm told what to do." This approach opens the door for a more empathetic, understanding conversation. Lastly, practice self-awareness. The Stoics believed that self-reflection was essential for personal growth. If you find yourself trying to control or manipulate your partner, ask yourself why. Is it coming from fear, insecurity? Maybe you feel like you need to protect them, but don't know how else to do it. Self-awareness helps you recognize your own triggers and work through them, rather than projecting them onto your partner. Building trust through freedom and mutual respect isn't easy. It takes time, effort, and practice, but it's absolutely worth it. When both partners feel free to be their authentic selves, trust can thrive. Instead of controlling or manipulating, you can love freely, support each other, and build a stronger bond. Behavior number 8, avoiding conflict. Let's explore into a behavior that seems harmless at first, but can secretly undermine trust over time: avoiding conflict. We've all been there. When a disagreement arises, we decide to sweep it under the rug, hoping it'll just disappear. But here's the truth. Avoiding conflict doesn't make problems go away. In fact, it can create even bigger issues down the road. When we don't address the tough conversations, we're letting resentment build up in the background, slowly eroding the foundation of trust in our relationships. Take the story of Lisa and Tom. They had been together for a few years, and on the surface, everything seemed fine. They rarely fought, and their days together flowed smoothly. But Lisa began noticing little things that bothered her. Tom's casual disregard for plans he'd made, his constant cancelling at the last minute, those small actions slowly began to wear on her. Instead of addressing these feelings directly, she ignored them, hoping things would change on their own. But they didn't. Over time, Lisa's frustration started to grow, and instead of discussing the issue, she began withdrawing emotionally. She wasn't angry, just distant. Tom couldn't understand why Lisa seemed so cold, but Lisa felt like she was constantly giving more in the relationship without getting the same respect in return. That built-up resentment turned into distrust, and their connection began to crumble. What happened here is common in many relationships. Avoidance of conflict led to a slow, steady erosion of trust. By not dealing with the issues head-on, Lisa and Tom allowed those small resentments to multiply, making it even harder to repair things later. This brings us to an important Stoic principle: facing challenges head-on. The Stoics believed that avoiding difficulties only leads to greater harm. Seneca once said, "It is not because things are difficult that we do not dare, but because we do not dare that they are difficult." In other words, avoiding conflict only makes it more overwhelming when we finally face it. The Stoics understood that true strength lies in confronting challenges, whether they're internal struggles or external conflicts, rather than running from them. By avoiding difficult conversations, we let misunderstandings linger and trust begin to fade. But facing those conflicts with courage, honesty, and respect, that's where trust can truly grow. Engaging in healthy conflict isn't about attacking the other person. It's about addressing the issue with the goal of mutual understanding and resolution. So, how can we handle conflict in a healthier way and keep trust intact? First, don't wait too long to address issues. If something is bothering you, speak up early. Letting problems sit only gives them the chance to grow into something much bigger than they need to be. Avoiding conflict might seem like the easier route in the moment, but it only creates a ticking time bomb that'll eventually explode. Next, keep your emotions in check. It's easy to let our emotions take the wheel during a disagreement, but the Stoics teach us to respond thoughtfully, not react impulsively. When you feel upset, take a moment to breathe and collect your thoughts. Approach the situation with the mindset of wanting to resolve the issue, not to win the argument. This shift in perspective can help you engage in the conversation calmly and productively. Another key tip is listen actively. Often, conflict arises not because of what's said, but because we're not truly hearing each other. When your partner shares their feelings, listen to understand, not to respond. This is where empathy comes into play. The Stoics valued understanding others' perspectives, and by really listening, you open the door to resolution. It's not about being right, it's about finding common ground. And most importantly, be honest about your feelings. Keeping your emotions bottled up, just like Lisa did, only leads to distance and mistrust. Express how you feel, but do so in a way that focuses on your own emotions, not on blaming the other person. For example, instead of saying, "You always cancel our plans," say, "I feel disappointed when plans are canceled because it makes me feel unimportant." This keeps the conversation open and avoids unnecessary defensiveness. Lastly, be patient with the process. Resolving conflict takes time, especially if there's a lot of built-up tension. The Stoics remind us that everything is a process, and growth often comes through difficult situations. Be patient with yourself and your partner as you work through the issue together. Handling conflict in a healthy way isn't just about making things right. It's about building a stronger, more resilient relationship. By facing challenges directly, we foster trust and understanding. We show our partners that we value the relationship enough to address issues openly rather than letting them fester and grow. So, next time conflict arises, don't shy away from it. Step up to the challenge, and you might just find that your relationship grows stronger because of it. Behavior number 9, neglecting to show appreciation. Let's talk about something that often goes unnoticed but can have a profound impact on a relationship: neglecting to show appreciation. It seems simple enough, expressing gratitude for the small and big things our partners do. Yet, over time, failing to acknowledge each other's efforts can silently weaken trust. The result? Resentment and emotional distance. Take the story of Sarah and Mike. Sarah had been managing the household chores, cooking meals, and looking after the kids while Mike worked long hours. She felt overwhelmed. Yet, no matter how much she did, Mike didn't seem to notice. There were no words of appreciation, no acknowledgement of her hard work. At first, Sarah told herself, "It's okay, he's busy." But after a while, the lack of appreciation started to sting. She felt invisible, like her efforts didn't matter. One evening, after cooking a full meal and taking care of the kids, Sarah quietly asked, "Do you even notice what I do around here?" Mike, caught off guard, responded, "I work hard too, Sarah." "What's your point?" The disconnect was clear. Mike had become so focused on his own responsibilities that he hadn't taken the time to appreciate Sarah's contributions. Sarah, on the other hand, felt like a burden, and the resentment started to build. It wasn't just the lack of gratitude. It was the feeling that her efforts didn't matter, and in relationships, when appreciation is absent, trust begins to erode. This brings us to an important Stoic principle: gratitude. Marcus Aurelius, a Stoic philosopher, once said, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a privilege it is to be alive, to think, to enjoy, to love." This simple practice of recognizing the value in others can significantly change the dynamics of any relationship. The Stoics believed that gratitude isn't just about being thankful for big gestures, but about appreciating the everyday actions that hold meaning and connection. When we neglect to show appreciation, we risk turning our relationships into transactional exchanges instead of meaningful, supportive connections. Gratitude isn't something we save for special occasions. It should be a regular, consistent practice. By showing appreciation, we not only strengthen the bond we share with our partners, but also help create an environment where trust and understanding can thrive. So how can we express appreciation more regularly and avoid the trap of neglect? First, don't wait for the big moments. Sometimes we think we need to wait until a significant event or milestone to show appreciation, but showing gratitude for small, everyday things can make a world of difference. Did your partner make you a cup of coffee? Thank them for it. Did they take out the trash? Acknowledge it. Gratitude for these small acts creates a culture of appreciation in the relationship, preventing resentment from taking root. Next, be specific. Instead of a generic thanks, try to be specific about what you appreciate. Instead of saying, "Thanks for everything you do," try, "I really appreciate how you handled the kids this morning. It made my day so much easier." Specificity shows that you truly notice the effort your partner is putting in, making them feel seen and valued. It's also important to acknowledge their sacrifices. Relationships often involve giving and compromise, and recognizing the sacrifices our partners make can go a long way. Maybe your partner sacrifices time, energy, or personal comfort to support you. Acknowledge that. Say something like, "I know you've been working hard, and I really appreciate how you always make time for us." Don't forget physical gestures. Words are powerful, but actions can speak just as loudly. A simple touch, a hug, or a thoughtful gesture can convey appreciation without saying a word. When Sarah feels seen by Mike, not just through his words but his actions, like helping out with chores or just offering a smile, it reassures her that he values her efforts. And finally, make appreciation a habit. Gratitude shouldn't be reserved for the rare occasions when we feel particularly thankful. Make it a part of your daily routine. Before you go to bed, reflect on the positive things your partner did that day. Tell them, even if it's just a quick thank you for something small. By making appreciation a consistent practice, you'll strengthen the emotional connection between you both. It's not just about avoiding resentment. It's about building a stronger, more resilient relationship where both partners feel valued and understood. The Stoic teachings remind us that gratitude creates harmony in relationships, helping us focus on the positives, not just the challenges. When we show appreciation, we acknowledge the efforts, sacrifices, and love that our partners offer, which in turn deepens trust and strengthens the bond. We've explored 9 hidden behaviors that can slowly but surely undermine trust in relationships. Let's quickly recap. Number 1, lack of communication. We've seen how failing to express ourselves clearly can create confusion and emotional distance. Number 2, withholding affection. When affection is withheld, it can leave one partner feeling neglected, even unloved. Number 3, disrespecting boundaries. Ignoring boundaries causes anxiety and erodes the respect that healthy relationships are built on. Number 4, dishonesty. Even small lies can create a foundation of mistrust that's difficult to rebuild. Number 5, emotional unavailability. When one partner becomes emotionally distant, it isolates the other, creating a rift that's hard to repair. Number 6, inconsistency. Unpredictable behavior creates insecurity, making the relationship feel unstable. Number 7, controlling or manipulative behavior. This behavior undermines mutual respect and damages the trust that should be the cornerstone of any relationship. Number 8, avoiding conflict. Ignoring issues only allows resentment to build rather than solving the problem together. Number 9, neglecting to show appreciation. Failing to appreciate each other's efforts leads to feelings of invisibility and, over time, resentment. These behaviors may seem small in the moment, but over time, they add up and erode the trust that is essential for a strong, lasting relationship. The good news is, with self-awareness, effort, and reflection, we can make positive changes. One final Stoic insight I want to leave you with comes from Seneca, who said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." In relationships, mastering our behavior means taking responsibility for how we act, communicate, and show up for the people we care about. By practicing self-control, empathy, and consistency, we can create a space where trust flourishes. I encourage you to take a moment and reflect on your own relationships. Are there any of these hidden behaviors you've noticed in your own actions or in your partner's? How can you begin to address them, either on your own or together? Remember, small changes can lead to big shifts. And if you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Share your thoughts with us. What behavior do you think is the hardest to change in a relationship? Let's continue the conversation and grow together. Thanks for watching, and remember to always act with wisdom and patience, as the Stoics would advise. See you in the next video.